Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is an expectation of precision. You break your arm, the x-ray shows the jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, there it is, broken or not broken.
Right, it's very binary.
Yeah, the fracture is clean, you have a clear answer, but then you step into the world of human emotion, of psychology, or, our social fabric, and suddenly that x-ray machine just shatters. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
Oh, without a doubt. It's incredibly messy.
It is. And today, we are examining a very specific human condition. It's this innate, overwhelming desire to be together, contrasted with the painful reality that our gatherings always seem to fall short.
Yeah, they do.
Why do our absolute best social gatherings always feel, I don't know, slightly incomplete or tinged with a subtle sadness? And what is the absolute resolution to that human isolation? Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we are taking a deep dive into a text by the 19th century English writer J.C. Ryle.
A fantastic writer, by the way.
Oh, incredible. The text is called The Great Gathering, and it centers on a specific phrase from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1, which says, "Are gathering together unto him."
Yes.
Now, whether you are listening to this while preparing for a board meeting or sitting in traffic, or you are just insanely curious about theology, this innate human desire for connection is universal. So let's set the stage. Who is J.C. Ryle, and what is the historical context behind his perspective on human nature being fundamentally social?
Well, the timing of when Ryle wrote this text provides a crucial lens for understanding his perspective.
Yeah.
He was the first Anglican bishop of Liverpool in the late 19th century.
Okay.
So this is the height of the Victorian era. It's the absolute peak of the British Empire, but also, the zenith of the Industrial Revolution. Society was undergoing a massive, violent shift.
Right. Everything was changing so fast.
Exactly. I mean, for centuries, people lived in agrarian, tight-knit village communities. You knew your neighbors, your family had lived in the same county for generations, and the rhythms of life were tied to the seasons.
Very predictable.
Yes. But suddenly, millions of people were moving from those rural settings into sprawling, anonymous cities. The family unit was experiencing immense strain from factory work, long shifts in the textile mills, and, frankly, crushing urban poverty.
Wow, so the isolation must have been intense.
It was. So when Ryle sits down to write about this concept of the Great Gathering, he is addressing a population that feels unprecedented isolation despite living shoulder to shoulder in crowded slums and busy streets.
That's such a modern feeling, isn't it? Being lonely in a crowd.
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
And he recognizes that humans are inherently social creatures. Isolation is the exception for us, not the rule. He points out that if you go anywhere on Earth, people generally like meeting together and see one another's faces.
Yeah.
He actually uses Christmas in England as his prime example of this universal urge. He paints this vivid geographical picture, talking about the spirit of gathering sweeping from the Isle of Wight in the south to Berwick-on-Tweed in the north, from Land's End to the North Foreland.
Wait, let's look closer at that map he is drawing. He is literally drawing a box around the entire country of England to show that no one is immune to this desire.
That's spot on.
And in the 1800s, traveling from London to Land's End was not a quick afternoon drive. It was an arduous, cold, uncomfortable trip. Yet people did it anyway.
They prioritize it above their comfort.
Right. He talks about sons leaving London businesses, brothers leaving their desks, boys rushing home from school. I love the specific phrase he uses, the weary wheels of incessant labor coming to a halt.
And quite poetic.
It is. You can almost hear the iron gears of the Industrial Revolution grinding to a stop for just a few days so people can look each other in the eye again. And he fiercely defends these earthly gatherings.
He does, which is interesting for a strict Victorian clergyman.
Yeah. He calls out what he describes as shallow philosophy or cold religion that might denounce family gatherings or view them as frivolous or unspiritual. He says family affection is the secret oil on the wheels of our social system, preventing humans from being, well, mere devils.
That phrase, secret oil, points directly to the theological concept of common grace.
Unpack that a bit.
Sure. In Reformed thought, common grace is the unmerited favor that God bestows on all people, regardless of their spiritual state. It is the invisible force that keeps the world from descending into absolute chaos.
Right, the rain falls on the just and the unjust.
Yes. Ryle is saying that family affection, this innate desire to gather and love one's kin, is one of the few good things that survived the fall of mankind. It acts as a stabilizing force.
So without it, things would just fall apart.
Completely. Without this secret oil of family affection, society would completely seize up. Neighbors would turn on neighbors without hesitation, and we would destroy ourselves. This affection is a gift given to humanity as a whole.
Wow.
However, Ryle is also a strict realist. He points out the sorrow that is inevitably mixed into our earthly joy.
Yeah, it's never perfect, is it?
No. He mentions uncongenial members of the family, the fact that these meetings are for a very limited time, and most painfully, the gaps in the family circle left by death.
This hits so close to home for anyone listening. I mean, think about organizing a holiday dinner right now. You plan everything to the letter, the food is flawless, the house looks great, you spent days getting ready.
Oh, I know the feeling.
Right. But then an uncle brings up politics and creates tension. Or worse, the gathering happens, everyone is laughing, but you find yourself staring at an empty chair where a parent or a sibling used to sit. The joy is real, but it is fractured.
It's very heavy.
It is. So I have to ask, if we are wired for community, if we have this secret oil keeping us going, why does the fulfillment of that desire always carry a subtle sting of disappointment or grief? Why can we never just have a flawless, unbroken gathering?
The disappointment you are describing actually functions as a diagnostic tool.
How so?
It acts as a signpost. It is pointing the human heart to desire something permanent and unblemished. C.S. Lewis famously argued that if we find in ourselves a desire that no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world.
Right, the whole idea of an echo of something greater.
Yes. And Ryle is making the exact same argument a century earlier. The mixed pleasure of earthly gatherings, the tension, the ticking clock of the weekend ending, the empty chairs, all of it screams that this is not our final destination.
It's just a shadow.
Exactly. The earthly gathering is an appetizer, and it is a slightly burnt appetizer at that. It is meant to make you hungry for the main course.
That is a great way to put it.
Because our current gatherings are fundamentally flawed and temporary, Ryle shifts the reader's focus to the only gathering that promises permanence and perfection.
Which brings us to the mechanics and the purpose of this ultimate gathering. Ryle says this gathering takes place at the end of the world, specifically at the second coming of Christ.
Yes, the final culmination of history.
And he is incredibly specific about the nature of this event. He insists it will be a visible bodily return, mirroring the ascension. He references the angels gathering the elect with a great trumpet sound.
It's a massive physical reality.
Yeah. The dead in Christ rise first, and the living are changed. The sea, death, and hell give up their dead. It is an overwhelming cosmic physical event. It is not some ethereal, ghost-like state.
No, not at all.
But he drills down into two primary purposes for this gathering: reward and safety. Let's look at the reward aspect first.
Ryle describes this reward as the public justification of believers, where they receive the crown of glory and public admission into joy.
Public justification. Let's dig into that term.
In theological terms, justification is the legal declaration that a person is righteous before God, based entirely on the work of Christ. Usually we think of this as an individual, invisible reality that happens the moment someone believes.
Right, like a private transaction in the heart.
Yes, a private transaction. But Ryle is highlighting a massive future public dimension. It is not a secret acquittal handled in the back chambers of heaven.
Wow, okay.
It is a declaration before all of creation, angels, demons, and all of humanity. It is the moment where the hidden reality of faith is openly vindicated.
Vindication. That's a powerful concept.
It is. All the misunderstanding, the persecution, the quiet faithfulness that nobody saw on earth, the moments of choosing integrity over profit, all of it is brought into the blinding light and rewarded openly.
That concept of public vindication is incredibly encouraging, especially for someone listening who feels like their efforts to do the right thing are entirely unseen.
It can feel very isolating.
Yeah, you go to work, you do the right thing, you get passed over for a promotion by someone who cut corners, and it feels like it does not matter. Ryle is saying it absolutely matters, and it will be read into the public record.
Precisely. The ledger will be balanced in front of everyone.
But let's look at the second purpose, safety. Ryle uses 4 distinct biblical analogies for this safety. He talks about Noah in the ark, Lot in Zoar, Rahab's family during the fall of Jericho, and the 3 children untouched in the fiery furnace.
Those are powerful images.
They really are. In all those examples, the safety happens while the destruction is occurring all around them.
Right, simultaneously.
Yeah. The floodwaters are raging outside the timber of the ark. The fire is falling on Sodom while Lot runs to the tiny city of Zoar. Jericho's massive walls are collapsing into rubble, while Rahab is inside her specific house on the wall.
The contrast is striking.
And the furnace is blazing, the guards outside die from the heat, while three men walk around inside it. How should that specific timing comfort the listener regarding their own future anxieties?
This cuts right to the core of how we misunderstand divine protection. We usually think of safety as the total absence of danger. We want the storm to be canceled. We pray for the fire to be put out.
Always. We just want the easy road.
But Ryle's biblical examples show that divine safety is preservation through the judgment, not the removal of the event itself.
That makes a lot of sense.
For the listener worrying about the state of the world today, the economy, global conflicts, the moral decay of society, or the end of the age, the comfort is not that things will magically get easier.
Because they probably won't.
No, they won't. The comfort is that the gathering of the elect acts as a spiritual ark. Before the final crash of all things begins, believers are hidden. Ryle quotes the prophet Isaiah, "Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation be overpast."
So the gathering is an act of supreme rescue in the very teeth of the storm.
Yes. God does not need to stop the flood to keep Noah dry. He just needs to seal the door of the ark.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. We always assume safety means a quiet, sunny day, but you are saying safety is being in the right container while the hurricane hits?
That's a great summary.
Knowing how and why this gathering happens is thrilling, but it leads to the obvious question of who will be there. What will this crowd actually look like?
Ryle paints a very vivid picture of this.
He does. He outlines three defining hallmarks of the heavenly assembly, categorizing it as great, wonderful, and humbling. Let's start with the scale of it. He calls it great.
Meaning the sheer size of the crowd.
Yeah, he is talking about the massive scale. It includes all children of God from Abel, the very first saint who was murdered by his brother, down to the last person born before the trumpet sounds. No one is overlooked.
Not a single one.
He explicitly notes that the weakest and feeblest are present. The little flock that often feels so small and insignificant on earth suddenly becomes an uncountable multitude.
The mathematics of this are staggering.
Staggering, yeah.
When you feel like you are the only person in your workplace or your extended family who holds to your convictions, it is very easy to adopt a minority mindset. You feel small. You feel like you are losing.
You feel like you are crazy sometimes.
Right. But Ryle is flipping the perspective. The historical accumulation of believers over millennia means that the ultimate gathering will be the largest assembly in human history. The minority becomes the overwhelming majority.
That is quite the paradigm shift.
It is. And then Ryle moves to the second hallmark.
Yeah.
It'll be wonderful.
And by wonderful, he means full of wonder, shocking, surprising.
Yes, not just pleasant.
Right. He talks about the reversal of the confusion of tongues at Babel. People who lived 5,000 years apart or on opposite sides of the globe, like someone from colonial Australia and someone from Victorian England, are suddenly united with perfect understanding.
The language barrier is just completely gone.
And he adds something else under the wonderful category that made me stop in my tracks. He says it includes miracles of grace, seeing people in heaven we never expected to be saved.
Oh, that is such a comforting thought.
Isn't it? We all have people in our lives who we think are too far gone, people who are too stubborn or outright hostile to faith. Ryle is saying, prepare to be shocked.
Yeah, God's grace is way bigger than our predictions.
You are going to bump into people and think, how in the world did you get here?
Why?
And the best part is they will probably look at you and say the exact same thing.
Oh, that's very likely.
But then he gets to the third hallmark, which is humbling. He says there will be an absolute eradication of bigotry, narrow-mindedness, and sectarianism.
This is a huge point for Ryle to make in his day.
Yeah, he notes that Calvinists and Arminians, churchmen and dissenters will find themselves side by side. People who refuse to share a communion table on earth will praise together for eternity. We should probably define who those groups are for anyone who missed church history class.
Yes, that context is vital to understand just how shocking his statement is.
Go ahead and break that down for us.
Well, the Calvinist and Arminian debate is one of the most fierce theological battles in history, centering on God's sovereignty versus human free will and salvation. It caused massive rifts.
Still does, honestly.
Right. And the divide between churchmen and dissenters in England was even more intense. Churchmen were part of the state-sponsored Anglican Church. Dissenters were the Baptists, Congregationalists, and Puritans who refused to conform to state mandates.
And it wasn't just a polite disagreement, was it?
Oh no. In the centuries before Ryle, they literally jailed each other. John Bunyan, who wrote The Pilgrim's Progress, spent 12 years in a freezing prison because he was a dissenter.
12 years, just for disagreeing on church structure.
Yes. So when Ryle says these groups will be side by side, it is a radical statement. The reversal of Babel is not just a universal translation device where everyone suddenly understands Hebrew or whatever. It is about unifying hearts and erasing the bitter divisions that currently fracture humanity.
That makes perfect sense.
On Earth, we cluster into our theological tribes. We build massive walls to protect what we believe is the truth. But Ryle forces the reader to confront the reality that the heavenly gathering will be a massive collision of these earthly factions.
A collision of factions. I like that phrasing.
The pride that fuels our divisions will be completely dismantled.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate for the listener here.
Go for it.
If Calvinists and Arminians are side by side and all our earthly controversies are buried, does that mean our theological debates right now are a waste of time? I mean, if we are all going to hold hands and sing in the end, regardless of whether we were Anglicans or Baptists, how do we balance seeking the truth today with the knowledge that our current factions will be entirely obsolete? Should we just stop caring about theology altogether and just be nice to people?
That is the natural reaction, but it misses Ryle's nuance.
Okay.
What is overthrown in the Great Gathering is the pride and the unbrotherliness, not the truth itself. Ryle says everyone will be clothed with humility.
Ah, so the attitude is what changes.
Yes. The debates on earth are not a waste of time because they are genuine attempts to understand the character and will of God. The problem is not the pursuit of truth. The problem is the arrogance we attach to our partial understanding.
The arrogance, that's the kicker.
In heaven, our partial knowledge gives way to perfect clarity. The controversies are buried because the full truth is finally visible to everyone. The Arminian will see where he was wrong, the Calvinist will see where he was wrong, and both will be too overwhelmed by the glory of Christ to care about scoring debate points.
I love that. Too overwhelmed by glory to care about winning an argument.
The lesson for today is not to abandon theology, but to hold our convictions with profound humility, deep humility, recognizing that the person we are fiercely arguing with today will be our eternal neighbor tomorrow.
Holding convictions with humility is the hardest needle to thread, but it is what we are called to do. Having laid out the incredible nature of this crowd, the discussion shifts to why believers should actively look forward to it.
Yes, Ryle wants to stir up a real longing for this.
Ryle does not just want us to know the facts about the gathering, he wants us to crave it. He gives 4 distinct reasons to yearn for this gathering, contrasting the future hope with our present struggles.
Right.
Reason number 1 is the total contrast to our present condition. He says currently, believers are scattered like salt, or separated like lighted candles in a dark town.
Let's look closely at that salt and candles analogy.
Yeah.
Salt in the ancient world was not just for flavoring fries, it was a preservative. It kept meat from rotting. Candles provide light in the darkness, but for salt to work, it has to be rubbed into the meat. It has to be dispersed.
You can't just leave it on the table.
No. If you leave all the salt in the shaker, the meat rots. If you put all the candles in one single room, the rest of the house remains completely dark. This dispersion is entirely intentional on God's part.
So being scattered is part of the design.
Yes, it is good for the world to have light spread out. But Ryle is incredibly sympathetic to the psychological toll this takes on the individual.
Because being out there alone is hard.
Very hard. Being the scattered salt causes severe isolation and loneliness. You're out there holding the line in a dark town. Maybe you are the only Christian in your entire corporate office, and it is exhausting.
It really is.
The Great Gathering is the moment when all the salt is finally brought back together and all the candles are placed in one massive blazing room.
That isolation of being scattered salt makes sense, but there's another layer of friction we experience right now. The fact that even when we are together with other believers, it's still incredibly messy.
Oh, without a doubt.
That leads to his second reason to yearn: the complete unity of mind. Ryle is brutally realistic about the current state of the church.
He pulls no punches.
He really doesn't. He says it is imperfect, containing wheat and tares, good fish and bad fish, wise and foolish virgins. He writes that there is a Judas at every communion table, and a Demas in every apostolic company.
For those who might not know, Demas was the companion of the Apostle Paul who heard Paul preach, saw the miracles, and still abandoned him because he loved the present world.
Wow, yeah. Ryle is warning us not to expect perfection from the visible church on earth.
This realism is a vital shield against modern cynicism.
Explain that connection.
So often today, people walk away from the faith because they experience hypocrisy, betrayal, or scandal within the church walls.
Which happens far too often.
It does. And they assume that because the institution is flawed, the underlying truth must be false. Ryle, writing in the 19th century, is looking at his readers and saying, "Of course there are hypocrites. There was a traitor sitting at the table with Jesus himself."
That's a sobering thought.
By acknowledging the wheat and the tares, which refers to Jesus' parable about weeds that look exactly like wheat growing in the same field until the final harvest, he manages expectations. The visible church on earth is a mixed body.
We just can't sort them out perfectly right now.
No, we cannot perfectly sort the true believers from the false ones right now. But the future church, the gathered church, will be without spot or wrinkle. Yearning for the gathering means yearning for an assembly where no one has a hidden agenda, no one is posturing, and complete authenticity reigns.
That level of authenticity sounds incredible. I mean, imagine a room with zero posturing.
Hard to fathom, honestly.
Reason number 3 to yearn for the gathering is that no one is absent. It is the ultimate reunion. We are talking about meeting historical saints, Abraham, Moses, Paul, Mary, Martha. Plus, being reunited with the recently lost loved ones we were just mourning at the holiday table.
It's a staggering family reunion.
And then reason number 4, no partings. Ryle says it is the end of saying goodbye and how do you do. It is the end of earthly exhaustion.
This is a beautiful point.
He lists no more work of body or brain, no more anxiety for families, sickness, old age, or change. Think about the endless treadmill we live on today.
It never stops.
The barrage of emails, the commuting, the constant low-level anxiety about our kids' futures, paying the bills, keeping up with the speed of modern life, the glowing screens demanding our attention 24/7.
Exhausting just to list it out.
Right. Ryle is talking about an endless state of being calm, restful, and unhurried. It is the ultimate antidote to modern fatigue.
It truly is.
And thinking about the historical saints, how might anticipating an actual conversation with people like King David or the Apostle Peter change the way we read their writings today?
Oh, it changes everything about how we interact with the text.
Tell me more about that.
When you read the Psalms of David or the letters of Peter, you are not just reading historical documents from dead men. You are reading letters from future friends.
Future friends.
Oh.
If you actually believe you were going to sit down across a table from the Apostle Paul and ask him to explain what he meant in the 8th chapter of Romans, his writings become a living dialogue. It removes the academic distance.
That makes the Bible feel so much more immediate.
Exactly. You are getting to know the minds of the people you will spend eternity with. And regarding the end of exhaustion, Ryle's phrase, "no more work of body or brain," is brilliant.
It sounds so appealing.
The human mind is not built to sustain the level of input and anxiety we subject it to. The gathering is not just a social event. It is the entry into cosmic Sabbath. It is the total cessation of striving. The mental engine finally gets to turn off. This beautiful picture of rest, reunion, and safety forces a very uncomfortable but necessary question.
It always does with Ryle.
And Ryle does not shy away from it. The text transitions from these warm, comforting promises to a direct, unavoidable challenge for the reader. He states there will only be 2 groups. Right hand or left, safe in the ark or outside, gathered like wheat or left like tares to be burned.
There's no middle ground.
None. And then he asks a blunt question. Will you be gathered or left behind? He offers what we can call the taste test to check your soul's condition.
The taste test. This is very convicting.
Extremely. He asks what kind of gatherings you prefer now. If a person takes no pleasure in the assembling of Christians on earth and instead prefers worldly assemblies, feasts, and amusements while finding worship an absolute weariness, they cannot possibly enjoy heaven.
The theological logic here is ironclad.
Yeah.
Heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. Our earthly tastes are a diagnostic tool for the state of our hearts. Ryle is stripping away the cultural Christianity of his day.
Which was huge in his time.
Yes. In Victorian England, going to church was the socially respectable thing to do. It was how you networked. It's how you maintained a good reputation.
Just going through the motions.
Right. But Ryle is asking, do you actually like it? Do you love the company of the saints? If sitting in a room with believers, Singing praises to God and hearing his word is incredibly boring or frustrating to you now. Why do you think you would want to do it forever?
That is such a logical question.
You cannot hate the company of saints now and expect to love an eternity consisting entirely of their company. He is exposing the absurdity of wanting the safety of heaven without wanting the substance of heaven.
That is a piercing diagnostic tool, but I have to stop and ask a question for the listener who might be feeling a bit of panic right now.
Sure.
Ryle says that if a person only loves the gathering of sinners on earth, they are deceiving themselves about heaven. How does a person honestly assess their tastes without falling into legalism or faking an enjoyment they do not possess?
That's a very fair concern.
Because let's be honest, sometimes the visible church is annoying.
Very annoying.
The music is too loud, the sermons are dry, the people in your small group talk too much. If someone listens to this and thinks, I don't always love gathering with Christians, how do they handle that reality without just pretending?
That is a vital distinction, and we have to be careful not to crush people with false expectations. Ryle is not demanding constant, ecstatic emotional highs at every Sunday morning service.
Okay, good. That's a relief.
He is talking about the fundamental orientation of the soul. Recognizing a lack of desire is actually the first vital step. You cannot fake an affection you do not have.
You just can't.
If you realize your tastes lean entirely toward the world, the answer is not to put on a mask and pretend to be super spiritual at coffee hour. The answer is to go to God and confess that your affections are misaligned.
It's about honesty.
Yes. Desires are cultivated. In Reformed theology, this is the ongoing process of sanctification. We ask the Holy Spirit to change our appetites.
So it's not instant.
Rarely. You start by obeying, even when the feeling isn't there, trusting that God will shape your heart over time. It is about the trajectory of your loves. Are you increasingly finding value in the things of God and the people of God, even amidst the glaring imperfections of the visible church?
That takes a ton of the pressure off. It is about the trajectory, not a demand for perfection right this second.
Exactly.
Now, after this serious self-examination, Ryle concludes the text by offering massive comfort to those who are prepared but are currently suffering. He specifically addresses the sorrows of December, those holiday gatherings we talked about earlier.
Bringing it right back to the start.
Yeah. He commands the believer to look forward, quoting Paul. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. And he uses two analogies to illustrate why this future gathering should bring immediate comfort.
The first one is phenomenal.
The shipwreck analogy. He says that the morning after an earthly shipwreck is terrible. Even if you survive and reach the shore, your joy is ruined by the drowned shipmates who did not make it.
It's a survivor's guilt.
Yes, the grief overtakes the relief. But the heavenly gathering is different. He quotes Acts chapter 27, verse 44. This is where Paul is in a literal shipwreck off the coast of Malta. The ship is torn to pieces, and the text says, some on boards and some on broken pieces. All will get safe to shore.
That's a wonderful text.
Ryle says the great waters swallow none of God's elect.
The way Ryle lands this conclusion is psychologically brilliant. He does not dismiss the pain of empty chairs at Christmas. He acknowledges the tears and the grave thoughts sweeping over the mind.
He doesn't just offer cheap Band-Aids.
Right. He is not offering empty religious platitudes like, just cheer up. Instead, he uses the absolute certainty of the future to anchor the sorrow of the present. The shipwreck analogy carries so much weight because life often feels exactly like surviving a shipwreck.
Clinging to debris.
Yes. We are clinging to broken pieces of wood, just trying to keep our heads above water. We lose jobs, we lose our health, we lose loved ones. But the theological promise of the preservation of the saints is that not a single soul entrusted to Christ will be lost in the deep.
Not one.
Every single one of the 276 people on Paul's ship survived. Everyone gets safe to shore.
And the second analogy hits even harder, especially when you think about the historical context. It is the battle analogy.
Yep.
He notes that the day after an earthly victory is still deeply sorrowful due to the list of the killed, wounded, and missing. He quotes the Duke of Wellington, the British commander who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo.
A very famous quote for his audience.
After that massive battle, Wellington reportedly said, "There was but one thing worse than a victory, and that was a defeat." Earthly victories always require collateral damage. They require sacrifice.
There's always a cost.
When the casualty lists were posted in London, families wept even though the nation won. But in this final gathering, Ryle says the muster roll is perfectly complete.
What a contrast.
No believer is missing in action. If you are feeling lonely this December, Ryle wants you to know that the lonely time has an expiration date.
Precisely. When you look at an earthly commander like Wellington, his victory came at the horrific cost of thousands of his own men. The field was covered in casualties.
Yeah.
But the victory of Christ, the great captain of our salvation, operates on a completely different economy. He took the casualties upon himself.
They bore the cost.
He suffered the loss so that his soldiers would not have to. Therefore, the muster roll after the final battle is identical to the muster roll before the battle. No one is left on the field.
That is just staggering.
This completely reorients how we experience holiday grief. When tears rise unbidden at the dinner table, believers are instructed to look up. Ryle says heaven becomes more full every year while earth becomes more empty.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
The people you are grieving are in good keeping, and you will see them again. The sorrow is intensely real, but it is temporary.
So if we synthesize the core arc of everything we have talked about today, we crave gathering because we are quite literally made for it. It is in our bones.
Yes, that common grace wiring.
Earthly gatherings give us a taste of that connection, but they inevitably break our hearts because they are flawed, temporary, and interrupted by death. But the final gathering at the return of Christ will heal those breaks permanently. It will offer perfect unity, rest from our exhaustion, and absolute safety from the storms of judgment.
And it achieves all of this not by abandoning our humanity, but by fulfilling it. The gathering is bodily, it is social, and it is incredibly diverse.
Reversing Babel.
Right. It reverses the curse of Babel and the divisions of our pride, gathering every single believer from Abel to the end of time into one harmonious family where the phrase goodbye is permanently retired.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We talked about Ryle's analogy that believers are currently scattered like salt to preserve the world. Sometimes that scattering feels intensely isolating.
It really does.
If your current isolation or your lack of a like-minded community feels like a punishment right now, consider this. What if your specific lonely placement is not an accident? What if it is a deliberate assignment?
That's a challenging thought.
You are the scattered salt. You are holding the line in your workplace, in your family, in your neighborhood, until the day the trumpet sounds and the salt is finally gathered back together. How does viewing your isolation as a temporary assignment change the way you face tomorrow? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining us on Reform Thinking. We will see you next time.